Okay, it's a new moon. Gotta call Scott, see what's going on. I'm in the office where I'm doing this really cool new project, and tell you guys what we got going on. I've launched so many courses. I've launched workouts. I've launched morning routines. I just launched I think it's 6 different Qi Gong sets. It's the sets, I don't know if there's anything else you really need to know other than like hyper-focused medicinal stuff. But there is medicinal Qi Gong. There's 3 levels of Baduan Jin. There's 5 variations of Swan. There's multiple levels of Willow. There's multiple levels of Wudang. I mean, there's so much Qigong in there. There's self-care, all that stuff. It's a simple $5 a month. You got it. And so I just launched that, so go check it out. You know, it's all about like new experiences, and this isn't it, but I did see my very first red-headed woodpecker this week when I was driving through the mountains. These things are cool. So in honor of them, this is my set dressing for the day. I should just hold it. I should just hold it. So let's call Scott and let's see what he's doing. This is cool. I love random. Anyway, so this is what we're doing here. In honor. There we go. Scott's waiting for me right now. All right, so we're waiting on him. Be sure to sign up on the site. Let's do some one-on-ones too. When I'm done with this project, I'll have a little bit of time. I'm kind of on a tour right now. Well, thank you to everyone that you knew I was in Hawaii and you reached out to see if I was safe. As you can see, I am. I'm not in Hawaii right now. My heart goes out to everyone that's out in Maui, and it's I have a lot of good friends out there, and so I hope you're all safe. There he is. Hey, how's it going, man?
It's going pretty good. Yeah, I'm doing.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think
Cheers.
so. Cheers.
All right, we're getting right into it. It's chaotic down here today, but in a good way.
Let me put my glasses on so I can look smart.
We left blank. We're going into blank. What is it?
Okay, I'll fill in the spots. So
I'm being strict with you today.
Yeah, that's good. That's very good for a monkey moon. We're leaving. The last 2 moons have been Earth moons. They've been the Earth horse and the Earth goat. And now the next 2 moons, the new moon starts tomorrow in the cosmology, the Tongshu, and they're both metal, and they'll be metal monkey and metal rooster, which just so happen to be the native element of both of those earthly branches, right? So every one of the 12 animals has a native element. They are most reflective of this quality of metal. And metal happens to be, in the cosmology of the Tongshu, basically representative of autumn and representative of that kind of editing process. It's the colors are like white or sort of translucent. That signifies this kind of transparency process, and also kind of a no-nonsense, desire for clarity, realism. Like realism is kind of the theme of the next 2 moons. Yeah, so I mean, I call it the midlife crisis moon. Like the monkeys are the midlife crisis moon because they sort of what they represent is like the descent, the actual, this is the descent of Yang Qi and the rise of Yin. Yeah, go ahead. Matt.
Can I say something to you? Can I be vulnerable? Yeah. I am in the middle of the most boring midlife crisis that there could be. But a lot of times I feel like people have relatively humdrum lives and then they have like a pretty exciting midlife crisis.
Right.
But me, personally, I'm just, I don't want to bring it back to me, but I'm just, it's like, it's kind of
dragon's midlife crisis. Yeah.
It's just funny because I just keep telling folks, it's like I am, because whenever we make big changes, a lot of chaos happens in the nervous system and all these other things. So, it's just stuck me in a state of like, I meditate all the time. I take like 3 or 4 times a day to just meditate. The problem is the more I meditate, right?
The problem.
The less important everything seems. So then it's like then you have to go back and partake.
Right.
And so it's like I'm on these farms, and then the last month or 2, I was literally like in the jungle, right? And then I'm back and I'm cruising around and I'm through the Carolinas, up through the mountains and in West Virginia. and all of these things integrating back in. You're just like,
It doesn't matter.
I mean, now I'm talking about it. I'm so joyful with things, but at the same time, there's a midlife crisis of you're just sitting there like, all I really love doing now is just sharing stories and stuff. But it's funny because you're calling it midlife crisis. I keep telling everyone I'm going through that midlife crisis of just I'm like, I don't even know what to do, where to go, not important, and it's hard to find the energy to care. But that being said, I'm full of, my heart's wide open, and so it's fun.
Yeah. Yeah, so the the notion of midlife crisis brings up a lot of things for a lot of people. I think that obviously there's so many more people that could speak to the topic in our culture of the midlife crisis better than me, but like it's just to say that we're at a pivot point, right? And that what the coming of these two moons represent is a pivot point. Right. And that's more or less what a midlife crisis is this like I can't do it the way I've used to do it and I don't know how I'm going to do it going forward. Right. And so we freak out and do a bunch of things in a really, probably bad way, at least in this culture. But it's just to denote this kind of turning point in this pivot point and potentially some kind of desperation, implying some sort of desperation that's involved because we are in a water rabbit year. I think it's a really good time to remember where we are, and that's in a water rabbit year, which is this sort of inward facing year. But for the last two moons, because of the relationship between the earth element of the last two moons and the water of the water rabbit, we've had a lot of sort of unconscious motivations, sort of filtering up to the surface and being given avenues to sort of forcefully express themselves and to look for fulfillment. So we've had a lot more latitude to move, right? And to try things and go places and it's usually come up from these places, maybe subconscious or unconscious, or even fully conscious of where like commanding our own appetites very well. But with a water rabbit year, you have to sort of factor in these kind of unconscious or subconscious motivations that aren't really just yours. They're part of the ecosystem in which you travel, right? So if I spend all my time in the Carolinas versus spending all my time in the middle of Oakland, my motivations are going to be different. So being affected by place is a real big part of any rabbit year. And so it's just to say that we've had a lot of latitude to move, and a lot of encouragement, both by the environment and, the way down and then the nay down, like the process within ourselves to kind of match and move and go forward, right? And that's changing, so the aperture is shrinking, from movement. And it's inviting more of a calmer pace, a more seeking of clarity, a certainty, cutting back on risks, remember, because the rabbit is safety and security minded. Because overall, what we want every year around this time, we want Yang Qi to retire, to simplify its actions and to share its wisdom. The central image anytime this time of year is and Ming used this a lot, so I got to borrow it. I got to bring this forward, is this image between the general fully outfitted in its armor, right? Old Yang, experienced, has kind of been through it. We've been through this summer. We've had some experiences, right? So we're sort of working with this feeling of capacity, that I can handle things. And the general and his granddaughter, which is basically the birth of yin. And so the question is always, every time this year, is that how is the general sort of responding to the presence of his granddaughter? Is this elder yang, becoming a protector of the future, seeing sort of the future of what's coming, and recognizing its own sort of diminishment of capacity? Still capable, but like, it's not like I'm not 21-year-old. It's like, again, back with this midlife crisis bit. Are we accepting our role as elders, when we get to a certain age, and wanting to be generous, right? Instead of like wanting to preserve. I can still do that and like trying to compete with a younger generation, they're very foolish, right? So you will want to nourish, right? So does yang qi go toward nourishment, go toward sharing, and protecting what this sort of younger yin is representing, which is the transition toward calmer times. And like, it's kind of a wake up call. This is the wake up call to like, why do I do what I do? What are the sort of even emotional principles behind what I'm invested in? What really matters to me, that kind of thing. Or am I just sort of dismissing all those things? I'm, kicking my granddaughter out of the conference room and staying serious and staying with this idea that I need to accumulate and accomplish. Can the general change a diaper?
It's funny. I was visiting my family out in West Virginia. My family on my mom's side is they're all coal miners, right? And they're in a lot of these towns that are just, it's like population used to be 5,000, 6,000. Now the population is like 300. You know what I mean?
Right.
The mines are done. And yeah, it was very cool sad to go into those towns and see these beautiful places. The architecture and stuff there is really cool. And they're out in the country in these beautiful locations, but it's interesting to like go and you're looking at the elders, my family. I mean, I just took my uncle who he was working in the mines for 10, 20 years, and then he moved off and he ran the welding school and trained a lot of the engineers and welders for that. And so he ran the school for that. So not many people in that area didn't train under him. He was a teacher. But he welded for another 30 years, and his kid and his grandkids, everyone welds, and they all were trained by him. So it's interesting, like driving through those towns and listening to his history of these areas, because I've been around environmentalists, right? And to see just the lens that he's carrying his wisdom from, right? Then because he's in tune with the land, but he's also in tune with what they've been taking from the land and seeing what a culture was that was based off, for what the farmers would always say, a culture based off extraction versus a culture based on creation, right? Consumption. And it's, man, it was like, it was kind of mind blowing to hear, because these guys are wise and they're kind, and they, he runs the church that he was going to when he was a child. And now he's the pastor of that church. And it's built on a giant mountain of coal slag, which is like all the runoff. And, so like there's a river here. And then when the land was here in 1910, now it's 500 feet higher of just coal runoff. And then grass has grown on top of it. And they put a church on top of it. So it's like waste that they live on. And it's this crazy, but the thing about it is, you talk about connection to home. It's like, it's interesting their loving connection to this place, because regardless of what they took from it, they also helped create it.
Yeah, I mean, the investments that we make are always reflect the service that we have to our community, right? So these are human endeavors. There isn't like one, human community that's better than another human community. They just have different priorities, right? So the task of, at least the Confucian mindset, was to try to find out, how do we get environmentalists and coal people to talk to each other? Or like, how do we get the tribe that's downriver to talk to the tribe that's upriver or lives in the hills? They have different priorities. They tell different stories, about their relationships to the land. So from this cosmology standpoint, that kind of falls under the concerns of the Confucian mindset, which is to see the commonalities by virtue of being human, that every single one of these communities, despite its different relationships to the land, actually has, and then that way you're able to, when you draw people together in that way, then you can actually take a more relational viewpoint toward the land, which everybody is ready to do. That's sort of another assumption of the Confucian mindset, is that we, by virtue of being human, we are in relationship. No matter, even
Okay.
if the environmentalists say you're not, you are.
So we are in Middle Monkey.
Metal monkey. Yeah. So, I mean, it's really
And
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I was gonna say quick, what's the elevator pitch? What's the Metal Monkey? What is the basic gist
Okay. Yeah.
of Metal
So
Monkey?
again, it's pivot. It's pivot, and it's
Okay.
really, if we just wanted to use one word, it's pivot. And to understand that the pivot is coming, so if you are trying to sustain your position again with a midlife crisis idea, right? The stereotypical midlife crisis, they're trying to sustain their relevance instead of accept their retirement. Yeah. So
So if I
like
want a red sports car, I should just pivot and get a yellow one if that's
I
all that's
would say
available.
blue, maybe metallic blue.
Ooh. Oh, to match my
So
cashmere. I got it.
some pivots are simple, right? Some pivots are simple, and some, but because summer from this cosmology is considered to be a time of excess, right? That we grow, 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 grow. Um, it naturally it entangles itself. So some pivots are, easy to cut the entanglement and drop back, and some pivots are much more complicated. That's why it's monkey, right? So this is the kind of season of a natural imbalance. The autumn is the kind of time of natural imbalance, and some people might call that play, right? Is that we're sort of playing with these kinds of boundaries in a dialogue way because everything is in a flux. Everything is in this kind of pivot place. So it can, so for being in a water rabbit year that's all about discretion, this can be very uncomfortable. And because we can expect being in a water rabbit year that most of our investments and attachments have a deep emotional aspect to them. So when we get into these places of pivots, some of them these pivots can be relieving, or they can be also very uncomfortable. And it just kind of it just depends. But you really, in this dialogue about pivot, the secondary tier is to think about harvest or compost. That's very simple. Like if we're going to harvest, then we want to make sure that we attend to that, and because our energy is diminishing, so we really want to make sure that our remaining resources are responsibly attended to, and that we're kind of carrying out this process of harvest. Or we go to compost. But if we are, which has its own process, but and through all that, if we don't want to have a compost, that we want to take everything to fulfillment, then that aggression actually ends up ruining our resources, from a Chinese tradition, like a maintaining aggression. We have to remember the intimacy that exists between this period in the fall and the spring to come. So every compost is basically what's nourishing the next inspiration. So if you can't abide by any kind of compost, you have a problem this year. And that problem is a habitual aggression that's referred to as stuck heat, the stuck heat of late summer. And it can cause all kinds of problems just down the line, but it basically, in the short term, you're talking about like trying to put the brakes on. You can't put the brakes on and you have to crash, right? Like, so if we're habitually set to going 70 miles an hour, you can't just drop it into first, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you're going to actually hit the wall. And that's one of the sort of short term effects of being habitually aggressive at this time of year. But the longer term effects are more systemic, the ruining of the natural resources, as well as incurring, kind of stuck heat related illnesses in the body. There's a real deep conversation, of reciprocity between what we're putting into the environment and what the environment's giving back. And like fall is one of those times where that dialogue is very, very poignant, and clear if we know how to pay attention. But if we just think the natural world is this place where that was made by some theistic god, and it's just our playground and all these moral judgments and blah, 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 that we're not actually paying attention to what the messages of the natural world are, which this cosmology is very much predicated on. It's very much predicated on our like very real time, relationships in the natural world. Chinese tradition is very, well, if it rains on this day, then that means, the emperor has done wrong, or like, I mean, they have lists, like many, many, many books, lists in medieval times about this topic. So that, and it's just to say that they were tracking it, and they were looking for patterns. But the assumption is that our conduct actually goes into the world and changes the world. It does, especially if you're habitually aggressive every summer, all your life. You've just been going. So like when you get to the place where you can't go anymore, like that's where you come to a midlife crisis. And so this is the time of year where that actually is like very poignant. And so it's not just your behavior now, it's the behavior that you've habituated yourself to for the last 5 months and for the last 50 years or whatever. So
I'm excited about every year, I do the autumn Qi Gong. And last year I just recycled, but this year I'm reshooting it and I'm adding more of I think people know the Yama system a little bit more. And so I'm actually adding, the spine flexing series that I used to give you.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then more advanced stuff with like arms behind the back and from lunges and all that other stuff. So I'm adding spine flexing to it. And a little bit more breathing and bone breathing stuff this year. I'm actually going up into a new property, and if I'm not killed by snakes or whatever's up there that I'm not prepared for, since I'm not in Hawaii now, there's predators around, so I gotta like wrap my head around the late night walk that I did through the woods the other day, and just sandals. I was like, oh yeah, I can't do this here. It's like I need to get back and put some kind of, I can't just willy-nilly walk through this area. So anyways, I'm excited about releasing that. And when I get into the Bay, I'm putting up, I'll be in the Bay Area soon, and I'm going to try to do Yama workshops and also live spine flexing. So it's going to be really fun. And,
okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be super fun. But I'm saying this to everyone because it's about like you take your yang and you handle it, you nourish it, and you put it in the bones to where you can carry it into the winter. And it's in you as opposed to like flying out all around. It's like
that's very good. Yeah, like there's that Ming talked about that as well. Is where you're basically in a process of distillation. You're allowing yin to sort of inform yang qi, and creating this process of distillation where you basically come to like this gem-like quality of your yang qi, right? That's
truly outrageous.
Which is basically this sort of this quality of just movement, without direction or purpose, like just really distilling this sense of just pure movement down, and then that's something that you bring inward and preserve, like. And care for, because that is what gets nourished through the later fall, and that keeps you warm in the winter. Like it keeps you nourished, and you're able to receive inspiration. It's something that can actually listen, and make sense of what yin environmentally will be providing, which is a lot. So you need to be able to discern all the messages of yin in deep winter, and how you do that is by preserving that precious yang qi.
Can we do a lightning round?
Yeah, go for it.
Ooh, okay. Hold on. All right, America. And if you guys really want this pin right here, if you guys call me, I can teach you how to make one of the best shanks possible. This has been, I teach people a lot of times homemade weapons, and my old man taught me. This is the pin though, this little Bic pin. Those
old Bic clear pens?
Yeah, these, whatever these are, right? Best shank, I don't really want to teach people how to make shanks, but if we're just, whatever. I'm always, you got to have a range and what you can teach people. And so I was just around my family, and
Yeah, it's just in case this video gets broadcasted into prison.
Yeah, yeah, and all my family, the entire time I'm there, they're like, "How you doing?" Because every time I went to that, keep in mind, guys, every time I went on that mountain from I can't remember, all the way up until I was 18 years old. When I graduated high school and I went to the mountain, I finally went there, and that mountain is very much like New Orleans. Every time I went up in those mountains with anyone else, other than being alone, I always went to the hospital. I was always beaten by something. Usually a multiple group of people, beaten in the hospital. I think I was hospitalized every time I was on that mountain from the moment I can remember, like from age 3 all the way up until I was like 16, 17 years old. And then I finally went when I was 18, and none of my cousins were there. I didn't go out with them, so I wasn't that long-haired, having to bang it out with a bunch of hillbillies. But, it always came down to either, getting bullied, or I've been caught on fire, and, it's just all kinds of stuff. So anyways, it was really nice to go there. And but you guys wonder why I know about all this. Is every time that would happen, my dad would teach me how to make certain weapons, or, something, how to shoot, how to hit back, don't bully, don't be bullied. That was like our rule. And, all right, so let's name these things. I can edit it out. So what do you want to start with? You ready? Mm-hmm. All right. Quick advice for everyone. Rat, go.
Rats actually shine, but they shouldn't get too comfortable. They should actually just. It's about their social context, and they really shouldn't modify anything that they're doing. They should just stay with routine. But in that routine, they do really well.
Ox.
Ox are one of the two that does very well this moon. And you wouldn't think of it, but like ox actually going to be a pretty strong refuge for a lot of people. If you think about it, like who thrives in chaos? Who thrives in crisis management? Particularly when the year, the water rabbit year, calls for discretion. So ox are one of those people that do well because the people that know ox trust ox, and so they'll be coming to them being like, and leaning on the ox when things hit the fan. It's going to be the ox who hears about it. For them, it's not really an inconvenience. It's just part of who they are.
Okay. Tiger.
Tigers and rabbits want no part of what's about to happen. Not interested at all. So I fully expect tigers to kind of disappear, and just sort of naturally. What I would suggest to tigers and to rabbits is to struggle with their environment. They at this point they should have a pretty clear understanding of who their refuges are. Because it's a smaller list, especially in a water rabbit year. So they should really just stay. They shouldn't struggle with the changes that come. This will feel, for both tigers and for rabbits, will feel fairly destabilizing. But they shouldn't overreact. Don't overreact.
Anything else for rabbit?
Tigers are a bit more independent. So the rabbit is mostly, if you have your intimate circles, you should really just stay there.
Okay. Dragon.
Dragon is like ox is one of the other strong characters that do well. They thrive in chaos and crisis management. So they'll be getting a lot of that. So it's only a question for the dragon of how much they want to make themselves available, which in a metal monkey moon could be a whole lot or very little. So kind of like a tiger, we may not really see dragons all that much, or they may make real strong impressions, or have been making strong impressions and like sink in deep with people during this time. So it's kind of up to them. Dragons kind of make their own decisions, but that's more or less what's going to be available for them, in this moon.
Snake.
Snakes actually a little bit more of a wild card in both this moon, particularly in this moon, but also in the next moon, in the rooster moon. So there's a lot of what I call liminal action, like where you have boundaries that are kind of loosening, things changing, things that felt stable sort of eroding. Like there's a lot of liminality, particularly in this moon. So that gives a snake a lot of freedom, to kind of go wherever they want, in ways that are very similar to a dragon. But they're not necessarily going to be announcing their presence. It's just that in all those spaces, there could be a lot of rewards for a snake to explore, but there also could be some perils too. Like there could be some tricky situations that they encounter. So, I can't call it. It could go one way or the other.
What's the definition of liminal?
I think we've been here before.
Liminal is a technical term. It means relating to a transitional or initial stage of a process. Do you want to hear the remaining one?
Yeah.
Liminal is a technical term. It means occupying a position at, or on both sides of, a boundary or threshold.
I'm glad we had that talk. Thank you. Okay, continue.
Yeah.
I don't know words good, and I just came from West Virginia, so I regressed.
It's to say that, and particularly in spring and fall, like especially as yin is kind of coming forward, it's to say that there's a lot of things that can happen, like kind of out of the blue sorts of movements, like are representative of this kind of liminal space.
Okay, horse.
Horses are at risk this moon, and they're at risk because they're not
at risk.
Well, they're at risk this moon because they're not really paying attention.
I'm never paying attention.
Yeah, I mean they haven't had to pay it for the last couple moons, So unless they've actually voluntarily slowed down, which is not really a horse's vibe, then they could find themselves like actually hitting the wall. This moon, so they should be careful. They should, hopefully maturity for horses is actually bringing forward some level of self-regulation instead of like thinking that regulation is something that they have to comply with, like that's outside them. But to have discipline for a horse is actually a sign of great dignity. So they should really express their dignity this moon. Even if there's some vulnerability to it, they should really actually be dignified and not think they have to prove themselves. But many horses will, become injured because they feel like they need to keep going.
Goat.
Goats. Goats are in a place of overwhelm because last moon was like perfect for them. Like even if they had to manage a bunch of different things, their instinct is to try to keep everything tidy. And because they also understand discretion, so goats did fairly well the last couple of moons, as particularly in this year. It was like sort of their high point. So trying to keep that same level of tidiness going into the monkey moon will actually present some suffering for them, but they're prepared for that. They're like, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing, So, I think that, depending on them personally, how much they're used to like giving their all, kind of thing, is how well in experiencing some disappointment is going to depend on like how they feel this moon. But they should also, like a horse, try to relax.
About monkey.
Monkeys, you would think they would do very well. It's their moon, right? And they will feel very empowered. Most likely, they're going to feel very comfortable. But depending on their element, they could also be at risk if they overreach. Like, because if they think that everybody's there to listen to them, they could be uh, rudely surprised, and they could be kind of put back on their heels and actually not see it coming, but it depends, it's kind of plus or minus on that, as to whether or not they're able to handle all the not only the variations and the kind of crisis management, but be able to do it with nuance, subtlety. So if they're experienced at subtlety and that kind of nuance, then they could sort of really be very influential. But if they're just sort of loud, then it'll be tolerated. But like, I don't think they will be as influential as they think they are. So yeah, that could sort of turn on them at some point in the moon or in the rooster moon when things kind of tighten up even.
What about rooster?
I mean, roosters really shouldn't be sticking their head up. Like, they should be good, kind of where they're at. I mean, yes, the elements are a little bit more comfortable for them this moon and next moon, but roosters aren't necessarily privy to the kind of wild movements that monkeys do. So this already sort of opaque, situation that comes with this kind of water rabbity, I don't really know what you're saying, can you speak clear words in English for me, please? That kind of vibe that the rooster is always sort of navigating in the monkey year, or sorry, in the rabbit year, kind of also gets a little turned on its head in monkey, where it's like even more confusing, potentially. So next moon, in the rooster moon, they do kind of take the lead. Their skills at translation will be improved, and you may experience some of that, but I can't really guarantee that it's going to go very well, because it could turn on a dime and pivot back the other and bring more frustration. So tough to say. Both dogs and pigs should really stick to routine, because they've done well, the last couple of moons. It's been, pretty straightforward process where they've had a lot of space to be flexible, as they want to be. They want to be flexible. The monkey's level of flexibility is can feel a little jarring, to both dogs and pigs. So my general advice for both dogs and pigs is to kind of glide. It's a little bit like was that phrase from Toy Story? I'm not flying, I'm falling with style. It's that kind of gliding to rest that both dogs and pigs should sort of open themselves up to, and try not to overreact. For both dogs and pigs. And dogs would be more susceptible because they are a little bit more prone to being emotionally invested. They like stability, and they're so monkey can kind of shake the foundations a little bit, and it's kind of like a pea in that old fairy tale about the princess and the pea.
Princess and the pea. Yeah.
Right, so they'll feel that pee in the mattress, even if no big changes happen. They'll might have some processing to do around it. Whereas the pig will be, I'll still sleep, no problem. So their tolerance is much higher, generally speaking, than dogs. But tolerance means more opportunity for the monkey to really mess with them. So that the prescription is kind of the same. Just because you're more tolerant doesn't mean, oh, your limit's higher, your pain threshold's higher, oh, let's ramp it up. So that can happen to a pig. So they shouldn't take things for granted, be like, oh, I can cope with this, and just keep going. They should actually take the cue to withdraw.
Can I give you a round of applause?
Thank you.
That's good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
regardless of what goes on, slow is smooth, smooth is fast, and never hurry, accomplish everything. Right, the rules of nature.
Right.
I'm super grateful, man, and we'll see what's going on. Everyone, get on the site and get a reading from Scott as well. Good gift for the holidays. Holidays are coming up. Astrology reading is a great gift. And,
Thank you.
You know, I would suggest people get ahead of it now. I mean, again, I had a lot of I've had a lot of talks this past like year about taking care of yourself, because I'm around a lot of people that didn't take care of themselves, but now they need their bodies, right? And so do that. Get on the site.
Yeah, I really feel like in the rabbit year, there's been a lot of discussion just in the general ethos that everybody's tired and frustrated. You know, this isn't working for me. You know, like really feeling that kind of level of desperation and tension around like how things feel systemically. I think that the monkey and the fall, just generally, will really emphasize bring forward an appetite for critique. You know, so there could be a lot of hysteria. That's what I'm trying to get to.
So I just had talking about journaling this morning.
Journal that shit out.
I've been kind of talking to a lot of people about like, look, how much of your existence relies on something else coming at you in order to react. So it's like, actually, you're not creating anything. You're reacting to everything around you. So the world's coming in as opposed to you bringing your wisdom and your joy and your everything out of the world. So that has been an overwhelming source of my workload this past 3 months.
I always think that it's a really amazing thing to do is to examine both our assumptions and our appetites. Because those two things, you know, I've often said that like if you can track your appetites, you actually can tell the story of your life. You know, like, well, first I was into this and then I did that, you know, like, and you can tell that story of how appetites have changed and transitioned, as well as the assumptions that you make. And there's a lot of assumptions that we're working with, and a lot of appetites that we're working with that are inherited more than they are generated, right? Like, so making the distinction between both in your assumptions and your appetites over what's yours and what's something that you're just sort of feel pressed upon or feel like, oh, it's just required, I have to do this, you know, and you know, paying your rent, you know, isn't something that's optional because it's not in your actual appetites on a personal level, but it's good to make that distinction between the things you're obliged to do on a societal level in the information and the kind of orientation that you receive from that, and then the individual appetites that you actually have, you know, like in light of that. So, I mean, it's an incredible, can be a complicated process. And in these moons, that complication will be real, you know, like on that sort of self-reflective level. And also remembering that like there is no arrival to contemplation. Like, you know, like then, and like everything makes sense. You may have these sort of moments of epiphany or whatnot, but like chasing epiphanies basically sets back your contemplation by decades. You know, doesn't really do anything for it.
So funny. I mean, I'm working with a guy right now that I'm working with. Actually, I have 2 new clients that are over 70. Like one of them's like 76, the other one's 80. And it's fun. And I thought that everyone journaled or everyone knows the basics of breathing, but they're like, oh my God, I'm 80 years old and I've never been taught how to breathe. And you're like, yeah. So we breathe and then we do some journaling and a little bit of basic movement. And they're just like, this is crazy. I'm, you know, coming to the end of my life and I'm feeling, and that's, I don't know, it's a great feeling to be able to, see the things that I take for granted, you know, just, you know,
yes,
I've grown up
I was
doing
just thinking the same thing. Yeah, exactly. Like all the things that I've taken for granted, you know, grounding and breathing, you know, it's like you do take it for granted so much, but it's like if you can do that, then you can be ready to engage whatever, you know, like I think about that just in like trying to shoot a video, you know, with you, you know, like whatever, just like, oh, okay, wait, you know, like ground and breathe and just let go, you know, and like, and then you're able to be like, you know, present, you know, for what you're doing. I don't think you ever really master that. I think that's actually just part of having to come back to the simplicity of that. Is just part of what it means to be a human being.
Dude,
Brother.
happy Metal Monkey Moon.